Hey friends, have you been feeling off lately? Like you're floating in a fog one minute and then slammed with pressure the next? If so, you're not alone. June kicks off with a rare and powerful Saturn-Neptune conjunction that has implications for your perception of reality, the organization of your mental space, and your source of inspiration. And that's just the beginning. This month we're also looking at Jupiter square Saturn, Mercury going out of bounds, and a shift into deeper emotional territory as Jupiter enters Cancer. So let's get into it. Thanks for joining me for your June astrology forecast. I'll break down this month's biggest transits, opportunities for your mental health, your relationships, and why subjectivity is replacing objectivity as our training ground. Well, let's start with a big one, Saturn in Aries conjunct Neptune. In my recent webinar, I explored this transit through all 12 houses, so check that out at Astrology University if you're interested. Well, this conjunction is especially important for you if you have planets in late mutable or early cardinal signs. Over the last 2 months, I talked about the Saturn-Neptune invitation to sober up and how disillusionment can be a gateway to more embodied experience. Well, today I want to focus on something we haven't talked about as much, this conjunction's connection to mental health. Saturn-Neptune dynamics can show up in profound and personal ways when it comes to psychological well-being. Saturn's the inner judge in our psyche. Now, ideally, it helps us develop personal accountability, but more often than not, we weaponize it, whether that's against ourselves or others, and then it can become a source of shame. Now, most of us aren't taught what healthy accountability even looks like, so we have to figure it out on our own. And on the way there, we tend to make a lot of mistakes. Neptune, meanwhile, correlates with dissolving boundaries and challenging our perceptions. If your inner Saturn has gone to the dark side, Neptune can make it hard to tell what's real and what's self-inflicted distortion, and that can create serious internal pain. So here are a few questions to sit with. Do you have an inner judge that won't let you off the hook no matter what? A part of you that registers every shortcoming or inadequacy? When things get hard, do you feel totally alone, even when you're really not? Is there a voice in you that believes you'll never be fully seen or accepted, or that reinforces a feeling of a lack of worth? If any of these questions strike a chord, well, this could be a great time to do some internal work. In archetypal astrology, we don't ask questions like this to pathologize the planets as if Saturn's out to get us. Instead, this kind of self-inquiry can bring awareness, insight, and a pathway for change. And believe it or not, the new Marvel movie, Thunderbolts, gives us a powerful mirror to explore these themes. This film centers around a group of anti-heroes who are sent on a secret mission to take each other out. But things get more complicated when they meet Bob, a character who's wrestling with confusion, existential dread, and severe inner fragmentation. And right away, we're deep into Saturn-Neptune territory. Soon we discover that Bob has a traumatic past, a history of drug abuse, and he unknowingly became the sole survivor of a secret government experiment that gives him limitless power. As he starts to awaken to his abilities, he transforms into the Sentry, which that's S-E-N-T-R-Y, a fitting metaphor for a healthy Saturn function in our psyche, that inner guardian that watches over us and helps us set healthy boundaries. But things turn dark when Bob encounters his own shadow, and then he morphs into the Void, a literal manifestation of his inner critic, his depression, and his self-loathing. The film's characters find themselves trapped in shame rooms where they're forced to relive their deepest traumas. And this offers a chilling metaphor for a Saturn-Neptune trap, these inner mental loops of guilt, isolation, and despair that we can find ourselves in. Author Brené Brown teaches us that one of the most powerful antidotes for inner shame is to speak it out loud in the presence of a trusted ally. And the film taps into just that idea as this newly formed team of misfits reach out to Bob to both witness his struggle and to let him know that he's not alone. And here we see the Neptunian power of unity and empathy as agents that can dissolve destructive mental barriers, in addition to the healing awareness that none of us is truly alone. And in all of this, we get 3 powerful takeaways that we can apply to tap into the potential of this conjunction to help heal our own mental space. First, confront the inner critic. But as we find out in the film, it's not going to work to fight it with more judgment or to try to beat it into submission. Instead, extend an olive branch and meet it with understanding. Second, Embrace vulnerability instead of suppressing it. Recognize your inner struggle as part of being human. Acceptance is an important stage of healing that sets the stage for integration. Neptune can help us access the deepest level of acceptance, where we can cultivate unconditional compassion for ourselves and others. And third, seek connection. Healing often happens in relationship, not in isolation. But this can be the hardest step, just reaching out. As Brené Brown teaches, shame prefers solitude. Saturn, with its inclination towards self-sufficiency, is really going to struggle against asking for help. But Neptune has a message here. As Robin Wall Kimmerer says in Braiding Sweetgrass, through unity, survival. Just as trees have an unseen system of communication that serves to protect them, banding together makes us stronger and can bust through that limiting myth of pure self-sufficiency. Well, let's explore another Saturn-Neptune theme that can take us into even deeper territory: matter versus spirit. At one extreme, we find those people who live out the ascetic or monastic impulse. These folks might decisively renunciate the material world. This is where Saturn correlates with denial, restriction, or withdrawal, but in service to something Neptunian, a longing for union with spirit, for transcendence, or purity. We see this in spiritual traditions that emphasize practices like solitude or fasting, silence, or vows of poverty. It's a disciplined cultivation of interior space as a gateway to altered states, maybe through the practice of emptiness or stillness or surrender. Saturn provides the structure here, while Neptune provides the longing and connection to something transcendent. For reflection on these potentials, you can ask, are you longing for a spiritual connection or experience that might be asking you to establish new boundaries or disciplines? Is there a material component that feels like the sticking point here? And if so, what do you need to shift? And what do you need to commit to in order to honor your call? Well, now let's pivot to Jupiter square Saturn. This cycle kicked off last year with 2 previous squares in mutable signs, but now both planets are going to be in cardinal signs, and that really shifts the energy. This square is about engagement, not just adaptation like it was in the mutable signs. It says stop wavering and take action, even if that means leaning into the friction that's there. Depending on your situation, you might need to focus more on Jupiter's sense of meaning and purpose, or Saturn's sense of authority and responsibility in order to make the most of that square. Jupiter relates to our need for growth and potential, while Saturn is going to bring in those necessary reality checks. When these two clash, it's time to test your big dreams against actual limitations, or to run your sense of potential through the filter of pragmatism. And this month, there's another twist. This third square pulls Neptune into the mix too. So we have Jupiter square Saturn-Neptune. That means visions that are too idealistic could run into serious roadblocks. But instead of giving up right away, ask, what am I being shown that I need to get real about? With Jupiter square Neptune, we can run into issues related to a lack of Saturn boundary, like overreach or overspending. But Saturn here is going to provide some natural checks and balances to that, as long as we give Saturn a voice. Those who've been implementing pie-in-the-sky plans up until now might now be faced with the reality of limitation. In the face of such a revelation, we might sink into disillusionment, but we could also rise to the challenge and distill our vision into solid form. Well, now let's talk about Mercury moving out of bounds in Cancer from June 2nd to June 21st. When a planet's out of bounds, its declination is at its peak. Well, that translates to energy that's off the charts for that planet, and that can look extreme, unique, or even a little wild. For Mercury, that means extremity in terms of thinking or communication, including both talking and listening. Our senses or perceptions might be heightened, and in Cancer, the answers we're looking for might just be coming from subjective messages that don't make rational sense in the moment. Actor Tom Hanks was born with Mercury in Cancer out of bounds, and when he talks about space exploration, he gives voice to his watery Mercury when he says it's always a combination of physics and poetry that inspire him. Or take Alanis Morissette, also with Mercury in Cancer out of bounds. Her song You Oughta Know pushed lyrical boundaries in the 90s while powerfully airing her grievances to an ex-lover with the memorable lines, "And every time you speak her name, does she know how you told me you'd hold me until you died, but you're still alive." With Mercury out of bounds, our mind can feel unlimited, free to problem solve with an ease that's well beyond the bell curve. So you might develop gifts at wordplay or advanced intellectual skills. Think about World War II codebreaker Alan Turing, who has this placement, or delightfully unconventional author Margaret Atwood. On the flip side, our communication style might just come across as off the wall to others. Maybe we believe our own lies or distortions as soon as they come out of our mouths. As always, there's light and shadow available, and it's up to us how we express these potentials. So how can you draw out some of these gifts of this Mercury out of bounds cycle? Well, first, pay attention especially to emotional insights. Allow your Mercury to follow the threads of your feelings. Journal or share your thoughts with somebody close, somebody you care about. Don't dismiss an idea in this period just because it doesn't make logical sense right away. Mercury in Cancer reminds us that feelings are data too. And keep your eye on the headlines. One well-known public figure who has Mercury in Cancer out of bounds square Neptune might be making some especially unhinged statements this month. Well, let's move on to some planetary sign changes. Venus moves from Aries into Taurus, dialing down the vibe of urgency and dialing up the need to chill out. While in Taurus, Venus seeks pleasure through the sensual experiences of life. The sense and taste of the natural world become appealing gateways to relaxation. Venus shifting into Taurus might cause some of us to slow down and to take time to enjoy life's simple pleasures. Mercury enters Cancer around June 8th and then shifts into Leo on June 26th, when we might expect communication to become more expressive or theatrical. These last few days of June could be great to bookmark for adding more flair to your creative writing projects. Mars leaves Leo for Virgo on June 17th. Some of us will question the bold moves that we recently made with a newly critical perspective and ask, was that really a good idea? Should I dial down the passion just a notch? Could I have done that differently or better? We retract from bold expressiveness and we start to doubt ourselves in a good way before we take action. But that means that Mars might be more risk-averse in Virgo. And since Virgo's an unsettled sign naturally, Mars in Virgo might turn up the volume on irritation as a prompt for action. But that might be exactly what's needed in the moment. And here comes the big sign change this month. Jupiter enters Cancer on June 9th. This is a major energetic shift. Some of us, myself included, will let out a sigh of relief as we stop being pulled in quite so many directions and start to turn inward for our source of meaning. In Gemini, Jupiter draws meaning through data collecting or multiple sources of information. I wouldn't be surprised to find that Substack subscriptions blew up over the last year. But how many sources for the same news do we really need? Well, while Jupiter's in Gemini, we can't seem to have too many. But when Jupiter moves into Cancer, the subjective personal experience starts to take center stage. Now, subjectivity has its pros and cons. While our emotional experience can lift us into aspirational Jupiterian realms with Jupiter in Cancer, it can also carry us dangerously far away from objectivity. So perspective is key. Stephen Arroyo wrote that Jupiter in Cancer offers the ability to grow through cultivating emotional supportiveness, and that Jupiter in Cancer is best expressed when it's combined with empathy. So ask yourself, where can I be more emotionally supportive to others and to myself? And how can I turn emotional vulnerability into a source of meaning? As cardinal water, Cancer tends to draw us into the immediacy of interpersonal relationships and the artistry of maintaining intimacy and connection in our close relationships. Cancer reveals our sensitivity to each other, and those with Cancer planets are learning how to navigate those sensitivities while modeling healthy emotional vulnerability. For some, that's going to look like expressing care, and for others, it's going to be instigating conversations around a lack of care or perceived hurtful actions. So being drawn down, so to speak, into the emotional landscape and the unfolding of the present moment can offer a natural balance point to Jupiter that gives the potential for emotional weight, enhancing Jupiter's vision. And there we get enthusiasm tempered by sensitivity. Author Shel Silverstein's work is an inspiring example of what Jupiter in Cancer could look like. He was born with Sagittarius rising, making his natal Jupiter in Cancer a really important planet when it comes to his self-expression. In his classic book, Where the Sidewalk Ends, he wrote, "I will not play at tug-of-war. I'd rather play at hug-a-war, where everyone hugs instead of tugs, where everyone giggles and rolls on the rug, where everyone kisses and everyone grins and everyone cuddles and everyone wins. Well, that's Jupiter in Cancer at its highest potential. And it just so happens, the US chart most astrologers use has natal Jupiter in Cancer. So this month brings a Jupiter return for the US. That's when Jupiter comes back to the place it was in the natal chart. And this is a chance to reimagine its source of meaning through a lens of emotional intelligence, care, and community. And we could sure use a lot of that right now. Well, let's all commit to reading that Shel Silverstein piece as a daily mantra. For those of you with early cardinal placements, that's Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, you're on the front lines of this shift. Lean into your protective instincts, but channel them through Jupiter's dynamic of benevolence. Allow nurturing to become a source of meaning or confidence. Jupiter in Cancer can unlock opportunity through expressing empathy and caring for others. This isn't just about being nice. It's about recognizing that your own emotional sensitivity can become a source of confidence and strength. And that's in contrast to a version of Cancer that puts up shields for protection, but in the process limits those more positive potentials for growth. So let your emotionality be a gateway to experience of abundance and generosity. Jupiter in Cancer can develop an innate understanding of our need for belonging and emotional safety. Think about the benevolence of social safety nets here. With Jupiter in Cancer, we have the potential to expand our nurturing of familial ties outward in a spirit of generosity. On the dark side, we could use that energy to preach from a pulpit that excludes others, reserving our benevolence only for those deemed to be in the inner circle. Think about toxic nationality here. But we could just as easily preach from a pulpit that expresses care as a guiding principle. Care that's extended to everyone in our social circles. As Jupiter moves through Cancer, practice being positively responsive to others and connecting vision with emotion. Faith in others could be a source of mutual growth and confidence. Well, let's finish with a few key dates for timing important actions. June 1st comes with some nice headwinds, as you can tap into the flow of Venus sextile Jupiter while also aspecting the moon. You might wait until after 6:30 a.m. on June 1st for the moon to start separating from its conjunction with Mars. Check out the Cancer or Libra rising charts. By the time we get to Sagittarius, the moon's already separating from its sextile with Jupiter, but you can still pick up the Venus-Jupiter sextile. On June 2nd and 3rd, you can also tap into Venus-Jupiter sextile while the moon's in Virgo. All three of these dates are under the waxing moon, so they're really aligned with the intention for something to build or grow. On June 29th, you can pick up the sextile from the moon to Jupiter again, along with several powerful conjunctions: Moon-Mars, Saturn-Neptune, Sun-Jupiter, and Venus-Uranus. Check out the Sag rising chart to emphasize Jupiter in this mix. Well, thanks for tuning into this month's forecast. If you found this information valuable, I'd love it if you subscribe and gave it a thumbs up. Also, please drop a comment below. Which June transit are you most curious about or you're already feeling? How are you experiencing these Saturn-Neptune vibes? I'd love to hear from you. And stop by Astrology University this month and check out one of our webinars or courses, like the new one from Mark Jones exploring Saturn-Neptune, as well as his course on the lunar nodes, or the exciting new course 9 Powerful Keys for Chart Interpretation, co-taught by Kathy Rose and Hiroki Nizato, as they share some of Noel Till's most powerful techniques that can reveal both the unique strengths and the hidden challenges that shape a person's life journey. Visit astrologyuniversity.com/events to learn more and sign up. And until next time, take good care of yourselves and each other.